So President Calderon gave us that 3C model for how he sees smart cities, our topic, of course, here at the Forum: connected, compact, and coordinated. It sounds great, not only because we moderators love alliteration. In fact, it may even sound somewhat utopian to you if you live in a place where congestion is a daily ordeal and where transport is anything but seamless. So before we proceed to our next plenary, I'd like to get a brief show of hands. How many of you think that your city, the city where you currently live, measures up on at least two of those three attributes? So connected, coordinated, and compact. How many of you think your city measures up on two of the three? Raise your hands, please. Okay, not too bad, but definitely a minority of those in the room. So clearly, we do have some work to do, but the good news is it can be done. That work can be done. In just a moment, and in the parallel sessions and plenaries throughout the Forum, we are going to be talking about tools and strategies for smarter cities that are available now and that have been proven effective. And we will also look at how those new sustainable development goals that I talked about, how they can promote the use of effective tools and strategies that are out there that have proven to work. First of all, though, I'd like to take an opportunity now to thank all of the partners and sponsors who have made it possible for us to meet here at the Forum. Beginning with the Inter-American Development Bank. As you know, it is the main source of multilateral development financing in Latin America. The CAF Development Bank of Latin America, a development bank created by 18 countries of Latin America, the Caribbean, and Europe, as well as 14 private banks in the region. The Asian Development Bank is dedicated to reducing poverty in Asia and the Pacific, as you know. The Institute for Transportation and Development Policy works with cities worldwide, bringing about transport solutions that cut greenhouse gas emissions, reduce poverty, and improve the quality of urban life. And the Partnership on Sustainable Low Carbon Transport, SLOCAT. It consists of a multi-stakeholder partnership of over 80 organizations promoting the integration of sustainable transport in global policies on climate change. And we'd also like to specially thank our Transforming Transportation 2015 sponsors, Transit Center, a New York-based civic foundation that sparks innovations and supports policies that improve public transportation by commissioning research, events, and training sessions, and the PTV Group, which offers software and expertise to plan and organize transport, private and public, as well as logistics. Now, just a few housekeeping hints before we begin with our first panel discussion. Please be sure to have your name badges and your security passes with you at all times when you're moving about this building. You will need them every time you enter the building and also throughout the 2 days of our Transforming Transportation event. Also, as you can see, your chairs hopefully all have translation headsets on them. You may need those if you require translation, because a couple of our speakers will be speaking Spanish, including, as far as I know, in the next panel. So do avail yourselves of those translation headsets. And at the end of our session, would you please be so kind as to put them in the bins outside the door and not take them with you? Thank you very much. We will now move on, without further ado, to our first plenary panel, Smarter Cities for a Global Sustainable Development Agenda. Making a city more connected, more compact, more coordinated. Isn't that primarily a task for urban planners and local municipal authorities? It's a question we just mentioned, of course. How much authority, how much room to maneuver do they have? Clearly, local action is needed. But does thinking globally actually make a difference? And if so, what kind of sustainable development goals within the framework currently being negotiated, what kind of SDGs really could make a difference and foster smarter cities? Those are the questions that we will now address with a panel that spans 3 continents and includes policymakers working at the local, national, and global levels. It's my pleasure now to introduce them, and I'd like to ask them to come up here and join me in the assigned seats as I introduce them. We begin with Shankar Agarwal. He is the Secretary of the Ministry of Urban Development in India. During his 35 years of service, he has held important positions in the state government of Uttar Pradesh. You're over here, sir. Dealing with housing, urban development, information technology, finance, energy, transport, and defense. A pleasure to have you with us, sir. And I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Miguel Ángel Mancera Espinosa. He is mayor of Mexico City. I'm hoping that he has joined us. I know he was a few minutes late, but okay, I gather he is on his way and will be entering the room any moment. I'll introduce him nonetheless right now. Prior to his election in 2012, he was Attorney General for Mexico City, served in leading positions with the Ministry of Public Security and the Ministry of Social Development, and he has also taught at leading academic institutions in Mexico. So we're looking forward to welcoming him when he gets here. And it's a pleasure to introduce Jose Villegas. He is Secretary General of the OECD's International Transport Forum, which links 54 member countries dedicated to advancing transport policy. Formerly professor of transport at the Technical University of Lisbon, he founded TransportNet, a group of 8 European university research groups. He's chairman of TIS.PT Consultants and advised governments and international institutions in that capacity on a number of high-level transport initiatives. Great to see you again, and a pleasure that you could be with us. And finally, I'm very pleased to introduce Pex Langenberg. He is vice mayor of the city of Rotterdam. His long career in politics includes service with the Ministry of Infrastructure and the Environment, as well as with the Ministries of Transport and the Interior. And he also headed strategy and policy for the Infrastructure and Transport Authority of Amsterdam. Pleasure to have you. Jose Villegas, maybe you could come a little bit closer if you'll join us right there. Great. And then we'll leave that one open for Mayor Mancera when he gets here. Minister, I allow myself to begin with you, and I'd like to talk about that link between the national and the local that I just mentioned, and which of course was also addressed in the keynote. How is the rising importance of cities, particularly in your own country, of course, which is home to several of the world's biggest mega cities, how is the rising importance of cities changing the way that national authorities approach transport policy and investment?
Thank you. As on date, almost 31% people live in urban areas in India. And as you know, with a population of 1.2 billion, this 31% is a huge number. And we expect by 2040, almost 40% people would be living in urban areas. And as per the estimates, by 2050, more than 50% people of 1.2 billion, by that time, this population of 1.2 billion would certainly become 1.3. And that means a huge number of people, almost 650 million people would be living in urban areas. It's a huge, huge challenge. And secondly, as you know, that in India, urban development is a state subject and not a central subject. It's a federal structure, and under that structure, under the Constitution, the responsibility of the urban development has been assigned to the provincial government. So that's another challenge. And third, the transportation. As the earlier speaker was saying, that if we had to take care of climate, if we had to take care of the sustainability in terms of environmental sustainability, it is very necessary to go in for coordinated, compact, and connected cities. And that means we got to create cities which are meant for citizens and not for cars. Unfortunately, in India, the urban development is in the form of urban sprawl. And that means people are living at far-flung areas. They have to travel long distances. And that means they become globally non-competitive. If we want to compete globally and successfully, it is very necessary that we create cities which are compact, and the transportation needs to undergo a huge change. Instead of promoting individual car, we had to go in for public transport, and that means people should be able to walk to work, bicycling, walk to work, and then They should be able to make use of public transport, and public transport need to be comfortable, efficient, and faster.
May I ask you about one particular example, perhaps, to really make it concrete? We mentioned briefly just now during the keynote the role of bus rapid transit, and in fact, the co-host of this event, the World Resources Institute, has said promoting bus rapid transport in Indian cities is, I believe the quote is, the call of the hour, very, very important. Now, many Indian cities are, of course, implementing bus rapid transit solutions, but there are hurdles to be overcome. What can you, at the national level, do?
BRT is certainly a very, very important development in the development of a city. However, I personally feel that it is not a replacement of metro rails. It is basically a complementary kind of a development for a city like Delhi or Bombay or Chennai or any of these big towns. So we are promoting BRTs as well as metro rail services. When we come to the question of promoting BRT, the biggest challenge is availability of land. In our existing cities, it becomes extremely difficult to introduce BRT because the roads are already very, very congested. However, we had to find out a way. And we are working on that. It's a little difficult problem. But certainly we are confident that we'll be able to find out a solution. As you know, in a city of Ahmedabad, city of Bhopal, city of Indore, we have been able to introduce BRT in a very successful manner, in spite of the fact that the roads are very congested over there also.
Thank you very, very much. Mayor, a warm welcome to you. We have already introduced you, so I will not repeat the introduction, but I think we will repeat the applause because we're very happy that you could join us. Thank you very much. And that's what I call just-in-time arrival, because I was just about to get to your question, and now I don't have to skip over it. So if you will permit me, if you are in fact ready to speak to us, then I would like to ask you about what Mexico City is doing in the area of sustainable transport, urban mobility. That, of course, is the subject that we want to focus on in this panel. Now, Mexico City has taken some very bold initiatives to tackle some of the challenges to making such an enormous mega city more compact, more coordinated, more connected, including a new mobility law that your city passed last summer. And I wonder if you could tell us about what you feel are a couple of the key features of that new mobility law and of the initiatives that Mexico City has been taking in the area of sustainable mobility.
Yes, thank you very much. Can I speak in Spanish?
Of course you
Yes.
can. Thank you.
Thank you. Si no, le iba a decir que si me repetía la pregunta, pero la verdad es que ya quedó claro. La Ciudad de México hoy tiene un reto muy importante en materia de movilidad, porque el número de viajes que se realiza es de 12 millones, más de 12 millones de viajes diarios, más de 17 millones de personas conviviendo en esta ciudad. Y nosotros hemos planteado ya a través de una nueva ley este cambio de transporte, de lo que antes se hablaba solamente del transporte, hacia un concepto de movilidad. El concepto de movilidad incluye y coloca en primer lugar a los peatones, habla de las posibilidades de gestión de movilidad a través de otras maneras que ahora se están tomando con mucha fuerza en la Ciudad de México, como es el uso de la bicicleta, y por supuesto de un cambio muy importante que es el concepto que antes se tenía de hombre-camión. Yo soy dueño del microbús en el caso de la Ciudad de México y yo soy el empresario y se daba una competencia permanente en las calles que solo abonaba a la inseguridad y obviamente a una prestación de servicios no adecuada. Ahora se ha cambiado este concepto y la ley obliga a que se trabaje con empresas, que estas empresas de transporte sean las titulares de las concesiones y que eso permita tener una visión programática y una planeación de corredores específicos en la Ciudad de México. Tenemos que realizar esto y tenemos que hacer una planeación en donde creemos nosotros que con este modelo puede haber una reducción sustancial, una reducción muy importante de emisiones contaminantes en la ciudad, porque realmente 30,000 unidades, que son las que hay que sustituir, son las que están generando aproximadamente el 60% de contaminación en respecto de vehículos en la Ciudad de México. Desafortunadamente, no obstante que tenemos metro, que tenemos metrobús y que tenemos algunos otros sistemas, todavía el 65% de la población está utilizando los microbuses. Es decir, son los que más se utilizan, son los que más contaminan y son los que debemos de transformar. ¿Qué se requiere? Ayer tuvimos una reunión muy interesante con Banco Mundial, con el BID y con organizaciones preocupadas por este tema de la movilidad, y hicimos un planteamiento muy claro. La Ciudad de México fue la ciudad más contaminada del mundo hace 30 años. La Ciudad de México hoy tiene un modelo que ha demostrado cómo se puede cambiar. Hoy estamos monitoreando el carbono negro. Hoy tenemos estaciones colocadas en toda la ciudad que nos permite saber qué está generando la ciudad y qué viene de la zona metropolitana. Hoy estamos participando con el C40. Hoy la Ciudad de México tiene un plan y un programa a seguir. Ayer hablábamos de esta posible planeación estratégica con Banco Mundial y con BID, porque me parece que las ciudades son el motor de esta transformación. No hablo solo de los países o de la responsabilidad de los países, sino centrado en las ciudades. Las ciudades somos los que podemos hacer esta transformación realidad. Pero los gobiernos locales requieren del soporte para poder realizar este tipo de proyectos. En el caso concreto estaríamos hablando aproximadamente de más de 200 millones de dólares en un proyecto muy específico encaminado a trabajar de manera conjunta con el BID y con el Banco Mundial. La verdad es que México, la Ciudad de México, desde 1998, desde 1999, no ha tenido un financiamiento en este sentido. Por eso nos parece muy importante que ahora podamos lograr este tipo de proyección hacia la transformación total. Si nosotros sustituimos esas 30,000 unidades, que con los cálculos que tenemos se puede hacer un ejercicio muy importante, que podría ser cuando menos de 20,000 de las 30,000, estaríamos dando un paso sustancial en este camino. No me quiero extender porque sé que no es tanto el tiempo, ya tomé demasiado, pero no quiero dejar de saludar al señor expresidente de los Estados Unidos mexicanos, a don Felipe Calderón. Muy buenos días.
So clearly, a very big package of financial support to help Mexico City possibly play a role as a catalyst and a laboratory for the kind of changes that can be transformative. Let me ask you about one of the elements of your mobility law that does look like a very interesting experiment. I wonder if you can tell us a bit about why it includes a right to mobility. That is part of this new law. That is also something that has been talked about in conjunction with the Sustainable Development Goals that we'll be speaking about in a moment. But what's the idea behind that? What would it really change, this right to mobility?
Primero es que se tomara una dimensión clara de qué debe estar en primer lugar. La ley hoy lo marca. La ley hoy establece con toda claridad que el primer lugar y la prioridad debe de ser el peatón en la ciudad. La ley hoy establece con toda claridad cómo es que el gobierno de la Ciudad de México puede otorgar una concesión. Ya no se deja al arbitrio o a la demanda o a la necesidad de la ciudad, sino tiene que ser planeado. Se ha creado un organismo regulador. Este organismo regulador cumple con la función de ordenar, de planear, de ver cuáles son los corredores que se requieren. ¿Qué pasó en la Ciudad de México? Que se daba una concesión y de esa concesión podían salir 50 ramales, que llamados así quiere decir que la misma concesión permitía que los señores circularan por cualquier calle de la ciudad. Entonces, eso hacía un desdoblamiento que nos llevaba como si tuviéramos 2,500 corredores, por decir algo. La ley ya no lo permite, es mucho más estricta en ese sentido. La ley hoy obliga a que haya una consolidación del pago, un sistema de pago consolidado, en donde se puedan establecer los mecanismos de captación moderna y haya una cámara de compensación que pueda hacer la distribución de esta manera de pago. La ley hoy da un paso muy importante porque ante las resistencias, debe de entenderse, estamos hablando de 30,000 microbuses, o sea, lo que esto implica en la parte política. Sin embargo, yo creo que con esta ley de movilidad el mensaje se ha dejado claro. Nos interesa mucho y lo platicamos con la diputada Ballesteros, que fue una de las impulsoras de esta ley, cómo la Ciudad de México estaba demandando esta transformación, sobre todo en esta concepción, hombre-camión contra empresa de transporte, hombre-camión contra una empresa sustentable. ¿Qué pasaba o qué sucede cuando es hombre-camión? Que no hay mantenimiento, no hay capacitación y no hay salario además. No se le paga, el chofer está trabajando dependiendo lo que pueda subir de pasaje, es lo que va a ganar. Pues obviamente empieza a competir con los demás de manera violenta en muchos de los casos. Entonces, esta ley lo que ha puesto es orden, lo que está planteando es un modelo de transporte en la Ciudad de México, lo que está planteando son objetivos, está impulsando también el desarrollo de la bicicleta y está impulsando el desarrollo de otras formas de movilidad. Hoy la Ciudad de México está trabajando ya con proyectos muy específicos de inversiones ya incluso comprometidas para los CETRAMS también, porque nuestros paraderos o derroteros de estas unidades pues no era lo más moderno que nosotros pudiéramos ver en la ciudad. Entonces, hoy también se está trabajando para poder transformar el transporte. No podríamos dejarlo como algo aislado. Carriles confinados, más Metrobús, que ha sido un modelo que se ha probado y que ha mostrado su eficiencia en la Ciudad de México, y por supuesto el uso de la bicicleta que va creciendo. Estamos a punto, si no es que ya rebasamos a Nueva York, 6,500 bicicletas en la ciudad y aumentando solamente los fines de semana con el uso de más de 60,000 personas participando.
Okay, thank you very much for that explication of some of the attributes of the new mobility law. Well, clearly it does sound like it has several of the elements that we talked about as being components of a smart city. But the fact is, Jose Villegas, there really isn't a firm definition of what makes a city smart. Now, I know that the International Transport Forum, both within its research arm, its think tank, and also at the forum that so many of us attend every year, it has frequently addressed this subject. What is a smart city, especially when it comes to transportation, in your own view?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I would say there are two levels at which this definition must apply. The more modern, glamorous side of smart would say it's about digital technology providing connected information with which you have a better access to the possibilities of connections, opportunities, coordinated opportunities, and from that you can better organize, sometimes in real time, the displacement of people and the freight and the occupation of space and the utilization of resources. So this is the new smart. But there's the traditional smart, which often is forgotten because it's not so glamorous, which is you have to have a clear idea of what are your strategic objectives, and this then is always inevitably has to be declined into several tactical objectives, and the difficulty lies in when pursuing these tactical objectives to keep the consistency and respecting the strategic objective. Let me give an example. Many cities, at the same time over the last decades, have said we favor public transport, and they invest on that. At the same time, they're increasing the supply of parking in the city center. So what is the objective? You have to know. Many of them will say, we will favor the pedestrian. And at the same time, they will reduce the possibility of pedestrians crossing safely across the major avenues because the time is needed for the cars to pass. So it's really having a permanent attention to what is up there in the strategic objectives. Like any proposal that is made on any of the subsystems should have a compulsory check against that, those strategic objectives. This is more difficult in transportation than in some other sectors because the responsibilities are so divided. In most countries, in a major urban area, you will have some domains of the transport system which are under the national government's responsibility, others in the state or provincial, and another one at the metropolitan, and another one at the local. There are very few cities in the world in which all the vectors of the mobility system are under the same strategic political responsibility. And so this is the vertical problem. Then you also have the transversal problem, because very often you have different agencies, different modal agencies, each of them competing for the same thing. And again, in many cities in the world, public transport does not coordinate the use of the street space. So it must go begging for some space when you want corridor. And this street space is managed by the road agency. So again, the problem is complex, but it has to be clear what is the overwhelming strategic objective. And all separate, all individual decisions should have a compulsory check. And then, and this is the difficult part, the technology is coming, the market is supplying it. It will make things a lot easier in many aspects. Some new solutions will emerge, but also in these solutions we have to keep clear what is it, the real important things we want to achieve. If we do this, then we will be smart.
So you're basically telling us, and this was, of course, a point that we discussed at the outset of our discussion, that a smart city, the coordination extends beyond the city itself. It is a smart city within a larger smart framework and environment. Do you have any particular examples of especially innovative coordination mechanisms as between those different vertical levels?
There are several, but they are not easy to transfer because it all depends on the constitutional arrangements. But the main thing is really to say, even if the responsibilities for the final investments are in different levels, there is a integrator. And that normally the integrator is best placed at the metropolitan level. However, it also depends a lot on the persons. You need a champion to do this. You need political leadership. So there is no magic solution about the geometry. It is about the geometry, but it's also about the pilot. And it's the combination of the two that makes success. As Presidente Calderón was telling us at the beginning, no, it was not you, it was Andrew, sorry. But it was a good quotation from Jaime Lerner. And he was saying, if you have a good idea of what you want, and you can organize the different partners, and you bring the stakeholders together, then you can do it within the limited political term. So it's really about the geometry, but it's clarity and leadership. Those two things are essential if you want to get better results. Then you're smart, not only the technology.
Many thanks, Jose Villegas. Pex Langenberg, speaking of champions, Rotterdam has the aspiration to be a champion of sorts, namely 2015 is the target year that it has set as a deadline for becoming the most sustainable port city in the world. So 2015, not only a big year for the international community with the climate change negotiations and the SDG negotiations, but a big year for Rotterdam as well. And in fact, that is a goal of pressing importance, giving shipping's toll on the environment. When I was looking at the statistics, I was astonished to see that your per capita carbon emissions have in the past been nearly 6 times the global average, but that is not unusual for port cities. Indeed, it is perhaps even a bit on the low side. What advice do you have for cities that, like Rotterdam, are looking to put in place very ambitious sustainability targets?
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me anyway and talking about the beautiful city of Rotterdam, which is in the middle of the Netherlands, 70 million people, very dense populated. So the approach of a compact city will come by itself, more or less. Which also means that we have for transportation, we have a plan both on all both on the national level as on the local level. And when we started this very ambitious objective in 2007, of course, it was just 1 year before the economic crisis. The world totally looked a little bit different. So that's why we had that ambitious goal, not only to follow Europe, because the Netherlands does not have a CO2 objective by its own, but follows, of course, the European community, European Union on this. And that is minus 20% in 2020, starting with 1990 to count. And Rotterdam said, well, we can do maybe a little bit better in 2015. We can do minus 50% in 2025. So that was a very ambitious goal, not knowing that, of course, a year later, 2008, the world economy collapsed and that CO2 emissions and the CO2 price developed totally different than what we thought in 2007. So unfortunately, I had to admit to the City Council in November that January 1st we don't get to that ambitious goal. But that doesn't mean that we are doing nothing, and there are some hopeful signs with our policies since 2007 that we're making progress. And you are asking me, what can you advise to other countries? Well, first of all, there are absolute differences between countries. So a city of Rotterdam, 600,000 people only, compared to Mexico City is, of course, totally different. We are a port city, which means that the port is right in the middle. Part of the port is right in the middle of a very dense populated city. Of course, the emissions, both from ocean vessels as from inland barges, are right in the middle, which adds up to infrastructure, which adds up to other emissions from other sectors. So it's quite an ambitious task we have to do. And so what we did is, starting in 2007, the Rotterdam Climate Initiative, which happens to be a very comprehensive plan. No silo thinking. You should try to incorporate all kinds of measures, both on the housing side, infrastructure, on the economy, and of course, the item was, how do we get to a greener and a cleaner city? So we put a lot of attention, and please look at the website if you want to know the details. That air is, of course, important, CO2 reduction, growth, but sustainable growth. Alternative fuels, we are working very hard on LNG, on natural gas, on electricity. So on a broad range of items, and then when I focus on transportation, you can think of a lot of charging stations for electric cars. We are reaching now this month about 1,000 in them in a city. Our own car fleet will be a lot greener in the end of this year. We will also produce more heat coming, so residual heat, so heat which is not necessary for the industry, and we can use it for heating our homes and offices, which is getting a lot more, and which also could be an advice for some really industrial bigger cities to use that more. And I have a list of a lot of other items, and I'm happy to talk about it. It's a little bit too much, but so if I would just come to a conclusion, what would be the best advice for new cities who are going on this path, and every city nowadays is already walking on that path, is first of all, have time and patience. It's not an easy task. Have a clear policies. I agree with the mayor of Mexico City. You have to have some leadership. It has to come also from above, regulations, but also coming from bottom up, include the citizens, the firms, the businesses with your plans, because they have to do it. So both carrot and stick is necessary, rules and incentives. It should be a comprehensive plan, like I said, different regions, different approaches, different facility roles of government.
Thank you very much. I would like now, in a second round of discussion, to link all of this up to the Sustainable Development Goals that are currently being negotiated. And again, I'd like to start with you, Secretary Agarwal, and ask you how you think this new framework will affect India in terms of transport policy, in particular, perhaps with a focus to a point that has sometimes been criticized in terms of transport policy in your country, namely that it is perhaps too focused on traffic and not enough on people. From what I've seen of the SDG target in the area of transport, it has a specific reference to the needs of the most vulnerable. Will that, do you think, make a difference for your country?
Absolutely, but in the positive way. You see, for last many years, our focus has been primarily on the mere development, and many a time this development may not have been very inclusive. But today, when we talk about development, we talk about inclusive development, and that means development with equity. And when we talk about inclusive development with equity, it is very necessary to take care of masses. Those who are poor, those who belong to scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, backward, minorities, and even women. And if we have to take care of their interests, it is very, very necessary to go in for public transport, to go in for non-motorized kind of transportation, to improve our pedestrian paths, and to promote cycling in a big way. And to ensure all these things, it is very necessary to go in for compact development of the cities as well. Unfortunately, in last many years, our development has been primarily in the form of urban sprawl. So cities are growing and growing, and that is creating a lot of problems, especially for poor people. They have to come all the way from 20 kilometers, 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers to work in the center of the town. If we go in for vertical kind of a development, if we go in for good quality public and efficient transport system, certainly they'll be able to get benefited greatly, and they will be able to contribute to the national economy. So I personally feel that the new development goals are going to affect the urban transport and urban development in a positive manner, and not, it will not be an adversarial development.
Thank you very much. Mayor Mancera, as mayor, what are your expectations from the SDGs? What type of support do you expect for your initiatives to advance sustainable urban mobility? And there too, I think this reference to the special attention to the needs of those in vulnerable situations, that is the way that the target is currently phrased. Would that make a difference really in the way that Mexico is approaching urban mobility? Your city?
Yo estoy convencido que la movilidad puede cambiar totalmente la imagen de la Ciudad de México. Una de las cosas más importantes en la ciudad es definitivamente el tema de la movilidad. Mucho se ha discutido y muchos son los paneles en donde hemos escuchado las tareas que se plantean para combatir el cambio climático, pero me parece que si no hay un objetivo muy claro en este tema de la movilidad, no vamos a avanzar de manera consistente. Lo vemos con las ciudades como los distinguidos panelistas que están aquí, que coincidimos en el esfuerzo que se está haciendo para poder dar mejores opciones en la gestión de transporte. ¿Qué sería ideal? Lo ideal sería que al salir de la casa yo tuviera 5 o 6 opciones para moverme. Es decir, que pudiera irme al trabajo caminando, porque hay buenas banquetas, porque hay conectividad, o me pudiera ir en bicicleta, o me pudiera ir en un bus, y lo último que pensaría sería el automóvil. Nosotros, para poder hacer esta gestión, tenemos que trabajar de manera consistente y dar a todo mundo la opción de transporte. No solo en algunas partes de la ciudad, sino en toda la ciudad. Coincido totalmente con lo que se dice aquí. Hay que buscar que las ciudades sean compactas, policéntricas, que se evite la dispersión, que la Ciudad de México lo hizo. La Ciudad de México creció hacia las afueras y empezó a despoblarse del centro. Por eso es que hoy tenemos esta fórmula inversa en donde hay 9 millones que dormimos en la ciudad, pero convivimos 17 millones en el día. Yo creo que con el plan de acción climática que hemos planteado, que es un plan también de largo alcance, que no es solo en mi administración, sino es un plan 2014-2020, lo que queremos nosotros es lograr una reducción hasta de 10 millones de toneladas de dióxido de carbono. De esto solamente 4 millones de esta meta tiene que ver con el transporte público. Es decir, estamos hablando de un 40% de la meta, solo tiene que ver con el transporte público. Hoy estamos haciendo monitoreo del aire en la ciudad. Hoy estamos haciendo monitoreo en tiempo real. Quiere decir que en la Ciudad de México está día a día conociendo qué sucede. Tenemos este programa en donde lo compartimos con otras ciudades como Londres para conocer las emisiones de carbono negro. Yo creo que, y vuelvo a insistir, y quizá eso voy a estar insistiendo un buen rato porque ya tengo amenazado al Banco Mundial y al BID de que no voy a dejar de insistir en este tema, de que hay que buscar el financiamiento efectivo, con un objetivo claro. No es solamente el financiamiento de alguna idea de cómo cambiar el transporte en la ciudad, sino es un plan, es un programa. ¿Qué se logra si se cambia el transporte en la ciudad? ¿Hacia dónde vamos? ¿Cómo se puede apoyar? El presidente Calderón participó con la Ciudad de México para construir metro. Eso es lo que creo que tenemos que buscar, ese objetivo. ¿Cuánto nos puede beneficiar? Las ciudades tienen que proponer y se tiene que encontrar un apoyo sustancial para planes objetivos. Yo creo que hoy la Ciudad de México puede mostrar cómo sí se pudo cambiar un etiquetamiento que tenía de ser la ciudad más contaminada del mundo a poder participar ahora con temas como el que vemos aquí, en donde sabemos exactamente cuál es la calidad del aire y que cada vez nuestros parámetros son más estrictos, porque si estuviéramos con el parámetro de hace un año, todos los días serían de una calidad óptima, ¿no? Entonces sí creo que esto debe cambiar de manera sustancial. E insisto, la movilidad puede cambiar una ciudad. Cuando llega uno a Holanda y observa cómo tiene el trabajo en la movilidad, bueno, pues cambia absolutamente la percepción. Cuando llega uno a una ciudad en donde está llena de microbuses o está llena de camiones que contaminan, la verdad es que también se percibe. Yo creo que la movilidad puede cambiar a las ciudades y es un plan, cuando menos aquí probado, de 40% de afectación de gases contaminantes.
So just one follow-up, if you would, please. You've made a very compelling case for moving forward with this path, no matter what. Would it really make a difference to you, then, to have a sustainability development goal that is targeted toward transport and mobility, or is this something you're going to embark on anyway?
No, el transporte es fundamental para nosotros. No es decir, la meta global de la Ciudad de México es una meta mucho más amplia. Nosotros vamos a estar con monitoreo, estamos con un planteamiento estricto de conservación de áreas verdes. Tal vez esto no se sabe, pero de los 1.500 kilómetros que tiene la Ciudad de México, el 60% son áreas de conservación. O sea, la ciudad no puede tener un gran desarrollo, digamos, urbanístico. Hay un punto donde se puede crecer y donde se puede compactar la ciudad y lo demás no se debe tocar. Pero si estamos claros que la parte más importante de la Ciudad de México para este desarrollo sostenible, sustentable, es la parte de la movilidad, tenemos que trabajar, y coincido totalmente, poniendo en primer lugar al peatón, que fue algo que se olvidó también. Empezaron los coches a tomar la ciudad y empezaron a estar estacionados en las banquetas y empezó la gente a tener que caminar por la calle. Eso es lo que yo creo que no puede ser. O sea, un cambio que finalmente lo que cualquier gobernante quiere es que los habitantes vivan felices, pues tienes que hacer esto. Yo creo que tienes que hacer que una ciudad sea una ciudad amigable, que una ciudad sea una ciudad inteligente, como se ha dicho aquí. Y para eso una parte muy importante es ¿cuánto tiempo invierto en trasladarme? La Ciudad de México hoy tiene trabajadores que invierten hasta 3 horas de su domicilio al lugar de trabajo, pues cuando llegan ya llegan con todo menos con ganas de trabajar.
Thank you very much. Secretary General Villegas, what do you see as key aspects of urban transport that ought to be included in a new SDG? If I can just review briefly the current draft of the urban transport target, it refers to providing access to safe, affordable, accessible, sustainable transport systems for all, improving road safety, and notably by expanding public transport with special attention to those who are in vulnerable situations. Is there something there that you would want to expand, change, reduce?
I am, in my current job, one of the things that I've learned very quickly is the difficulty of drafting statements which are underwritten by many stakeholders. And you go around and around and around those texts. Personally, I prefer to have simpler things, because if you make it a sentence as long as that, has the problem that possibly many of the readers will not read it to the end. So, first preference, shorter. The second one, I don't think the focus should be on access to transport. It should be access to your destinations. And transport is an instrument for that. But if you have many of the things within your neighborhood, in this notion of the compact city, to which I like to add not another C, I'm sorry, but a D, compact and diverse, you have to have the functional diversity in the neighborhood so that many of your destinations are accessible within walking or cycling distance. If you have that, for those trips, the notion of access to transport is not even relevant. Then, when you need access to transport, all of that is true. But I would say, first thing is, the objective is access to jobs and to all the other functions of a pleasant, safe livelihood. And then when it goes about transport, I would probably go into saying it's something that Meerman said also, this is to have the diversity of choices. I don't like to say it's public transport versus private transport. It's giving the choices. And including in there some of the new options that we have based on the shared mobility solutions, which are not mentioned there. In many cases, the density of demand is not sufficient to have the traditional scheduled public transport with acceptable headways, acceptable frequencies. In those solutions, in those situations, new solutions of shared mobility based on smaller vehicles could probably be more effective in attracting people who otherwise would travel by car. So I would first put the focus on access to the functions, to the jobs and the functions, and then possibly cut the sentence in 2 or 3 smaller sentences so that it's very clear and easier to read. That's my suggestion.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Langenberg, you wanted to add?
Yes, it's not that I don't agree with the previous speaker, but as a local politician, if you read through the text of the goals and the targets, you might say, so what's happening here? We are, of course, in local situations very concise. We have projects, we have regulations, concrete things we like to change, and after a few years you see that something changes in your city. If you read through the goals, you think, what an abstract, does this help for the world? So I spoke last week with my colleagues from a foreign ministry who are dealing here on day-to-day basis, and they say, please, not too critical. Please accept these texts and also see it as a whole. Also number 6 on water, 7 on energy, and number, I think, 9 on infrastructure, all together can bring something in the future, which means that the United Nations is committed to do something on this. And it is important that in Addis Ababa and maybe later on in September in New York, these kind of texts are adopted. And if I look a little bit more focused on number 11 too, I think the big gain now is that there is some attention for example, road safety. So many African countries, politicians build big roads and think that's economic prosperity. But much more attention is needed for all the casualties, which brings all these big roads with high-speed trucks driving over there. So I'm very happy that road safety and more public transport is now in the text of those targets. So please, the grass is always greener, but maybe we should be satisfied with this. And besides the other goals, which also should, as a smart city, always have to think comprehensive. It's also, of course, an element which they still have to talk about the next few months, about the financial side, the financing for development, as they call it. There's still some very important decisions to make. Where do the money goes, also in the field of infrastructure, public transportation, etc.
May I just ask you, keep that microphone for a moment, because I'd like to ask you to say something about the role of the private sector. There is a strong push for the private sector to be much more engaged and more accountable under a new SDG framework. And I wonder if you can say something about the role of the private sector within the Rotterdam Climate Initiative. You mentioned it earlier. It is a platform that's charged with achieving a 50% reduction in emissions by 2025, a very ambitious target. How do you see the role of the private sector there and also within a new SDG framework?
I think it's very, very important to involve them in all the kinds of projects, both on the formulating of the goals. It's important to have private sector on board as to be in formulating the concrete projects. So, as you were talking about our Rotterdam Climate Initiative in 2007, we tried to have their signature under greener and cleaner, about how do we especially make our air much cleaner. Since the autonomous growth of more greener cars, of course, all over Europe in a dense population, the air quality has increased a lot. But there are still downtown and every bigger cities in Europe, there are big problems with air quality, and you only get there if you find the public sector, the private sector, to be ready to participate in all kinds of programs. What you see in Germany, in Italy, and also now in the Netherlands more and more, that because of air quality, you want those microbuses with the most dirtiest gasoline that they are using. You don't want them anymore in the city center. So you have to think about different strategies to for example, for logistics, and we're going to talk about it tomorrow. How do you find alternative forms to deliver your goods without having those microbuses, which are also, of course, for people movement? So I think it's important also in the concrete projects, finance them, help them, facilitate them from the city, but never forget, don't do it by yourself. Ask the private sector to help and to do their share.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we do have time for audience questions, so if you have a question, please come up here to the microphone and do tell us who you are. And if you'd be so kind, we have a lady here. Go ahead, please. If I have a lady here who was the first, and then we'll come to you. Go ahead, please. Yes, and if you'll tell us who you are, that would be helpful.
Not used to be called lady, so that's fine. I am Cecilia Briceño Garmendia. I'm a lead economist in the transport and ICT practice at the World Bank. It's very provoking, this discussion. Thank you very much for your discussion. I wonder, and I'm questioning the actual title of our own forum, because we say smart cities for shared prosperity, and the thoughts that you provoke in me is whether we should be talking about a smart network of cities for shared prosperity. Let me explain what I'm saying. We talk about concentration, connected, coordinated, and compact cities, right? So that has the concept of concentration of cities. But where to draw the line between concentrating the cities and providing mobility within the city and create a network of cities where we deconcentrate economic activities? And that's a question that probably brings the tension, the vertical tension that you were mentioning earlier, right? Combined with the transversal tension among the power of different majors and subnational authorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who would like to address that? We did briefly mention the C40 network of cities. Mayor Mancera, would you like to take a brief shot at answering that question?
Bueno, a mí me parece muy interesante lo que se plantea con este tema de la red de ciudades. Sí creo que hay que hacer un trabajo conjunto. Estamos hablando, es decir, el modelo que se plantea para Rotterdam o el modelo que se plantea para la Ciudad de México, por supuesto que no podría ser lo mismo. Por eso yo también tendría un punto de contraste con lo que aquí se decía hace un minuto. Sí, claro que lo ideal es tener una ciudad compacta. Lo ideal es que tú tengas en el mismo lugar donde habitas la posibilidad de llegar caminando a tu trabajo. Pero las ciudades que hoy son realidad en el mundo y que hoy estamos generando gases contaminantes, no tenemos esa posibilidad de manera urgente, de manera inmediata, a corto plazo. Y sí tenemos la necesidad de mejorar el transporte. Sí es una red, y yo diría no solamente una red de la ciudad, sino una red de estrategia a nivel mundial. Todas las reuniones que me he encontrado con los diferentes alcaldes en el mundo, coincidimos con este punto del transporte, el apoyo para el transporte, la toma de conciencia de los gobiernos del país, de los dirigentes del país, respecto de lo que está sucediendo en las ciudades y del efecto que causa al cambio climático en el mundo, ¿no? Hoy, por ejemplo, la Ciudad de México tiene un metro que cuesta 50 centavos de dólar, menos, poco menos. No podemos competir con los sistemas de transporte público, por ejemplo, que hay en Ámsterdam, en donde puede costar €1 el transporte, el subirse a un transporte igual. Entonces, ¿qué necesitamos nosotros? Necesitamos apoyo, por supuesto, del gobierno federal, en el caso de la Ciudad de México, y necesitamos también compromiso de los empresarios, como se dijo aquí. A mí me parece que ese es un punto muy, muy importante, porque hoy por hoy, para acceder, al menos en la Ciudad de México, a un vehículo eléctrico, estamos hablando de $70,000, que muy pocas personas van a poder. No es que no lo quieran usar o no es que no quieran cambiar al vehículo eléctrico, es que no es accesible en este momento. Entonces, a mí me parece que el apoyo debe ser consistente y sí creo que debe haber una red que pueda plantear estos objetivos de manera común. Y además hay libros, ya se podrían tener libros. A mí me parece que el ejemplo de Holanda es algo que nosotros estamos siguiendo en la Ciudad de México. O sea, es muy claro y sí tiene un efecto positivo. Entonces, todas estas buenas prácticas yo creo que es lo que tenemos que impulsar.
Thank you. So I'm going to the back microphone now because we
Yeah.
had a line there already.
you.
So
you.
go
Yeah.
ahead, please.
I-
And if
I
you'll
have-
keep your questions brief, I think we will now
I have
bundle
two
them.
short
Yeah.
questions
Please.
in Spanish for the Mayor Mancera. Alcalde Mancera, ¿cuál es el rol que usted le da a los impactos en salud en términos de su conexión con movilidad en la administración que usted está liderando? ¿Cuál es el impacto en relación a salud? Porque yo he sentido que mucho énfasis se da al tema del cambio climático, que es muy importante, pero como lo planteó el presidente Calderón, hay una cantidad de temas vinculados a salud que tiene que ver más con la calidad de vida de la gente y que es muy importante. Y segundo, ¿cuál es el rol que se da a la Ciudad de México en la coordinación a nivel de América Latina para la cooperación entre las ciudades latinoamericanas, dado que estas tienen más semejanzas que con otras ciudades que son buenos ejemplos en Europa, pero tenemos otras estructuras definitivamente en América Latina? Esas dos preguntas. Muchas gracias, alcalde Mancera.
Okay.
Muchas
Brief
gracias.
answers, if
Sí,
you would, please.
voy a ser muy breve. Primero, en el tema de salud estamos poniendo mucho énfasis. De hecho, la restricción vehicular que acabamos de implementar hace poco en un acuerdo megalopolitano, esto quiere decir de más de 25 millones de habitantes, obedece a esto, a que empezamos a monitorear y empezamos a darnos cuenta que los niños y las niñas cada vez tenían más afecciones o más enfermedades respiratorias. Entonces, esto claramente vinculado con este efecto de los gases contaminantes. Cada vez más también afecciones, digamos, de irritación y de molestia en la vista, y por supuesto lo más importante, esto de las enfermedades respiratorias. Sí cambia sustancialmente cuando nosotros insistimos en este tema de la calidad del aire. Y estamos trabajando muy fuerte en toda la parte de América del Sur y también con Centroamérica para crear esta identidad y este modelo de trabajo para nuestras ciudades que somos semejantes, porque estamos claro que hay una distancia tremenda en otros casos, pero a mí lo que me interesa mucho ahora es que esta discusión del cambio climático es permanente ya en todos los foros. O sea, si el esfuerzo se hace aquí, creo que va a haber un cambio sustancial. Ayer escuchaba el anuncio del tren bala San Francisco, Los Ángeles. La reducción de uso de vehículos ahí va a ser brutal. En México hoy estamos trabajando también el tema de los trenes con el gobierno federal.
Thank you very much. So go ahead, please.
Yes, John Wetmore with pedestrians.org. There's been some mention of walking as an important sustainable mode. What policy changes are needed to make walking a more attractive mode and easier for people to walk?
Secretary General.
Yeah. And there's a lot of technical issues, of course, but if you focus that the main objective is access, and as much as possible of that access should be done in walking, then from that immediately you derive the consequence that the sidewalks should be appropriately designed, that the crossings should be safe, things like that. So it's really the focus on the major objective. And I mean, we know how to do it. The question is very often this has been a kind of secondary objective, and then it is dominated by the others. That's all.
Vice Mayor, you want to add?
Yes, I fully agree with that safety infrastructure is very important. But also, I would add another factor that is just the public relations of a city. When people rank cities this moment, a little bit proud that New York Times put Rotterdam on the top 10 list. We have been in different times. It is also because our city center as such is very interesting to bike, to use public transport, and to walk. So infrastructure, big pavements, etc., shopping malls in the center and not 5 kilometers outside of the center, of course, helps to make your city attractive. Culture, waterfront development. This all means that people will use, hopefully, public transport to go to your city center. And if they have to go by car, then our city has the policies, put the car in concrete as soon as possible, as quick as possible, and not have those cars all over the streets. So the streets will be, especially in the very city center, downtown, in the city streets, are for the pedestrians, for the cyclists, and for people walking to public transport. So, of course, it's a big goal, and you have to make exceptions, especially in cities like Rotterdam, who are, after the World War, made for cars. So you have to be very careful, and of course, citizens who live there and small and medium enterprises want their goods to be delivered. Have to take that in account everything, but I think also just the PR, the approach that the city is attractive for people, that's a very important factor too, for people to use walking instead of car.
I'd like to add only one sentence, that if we got to promote walk to work, it is very necessary to go in for mixed land use. Over a period of time, the town planners and even the developers and the investors, they were very happy to go in for segregated land use. Maybe because of their greed, maybe because they wanted to show their own design. But if we have to promote walk to work, it is very necessary to promote mixed land use, and especially for bigger towns. And this is what we are trying to achieve for our 100 smart cities.
Thank you very much. That's also a theme we will be picking up in other discussions, namely the link between sustainable transport and general planning, including land use and urban planning. So we have a couple more questioners. If you would be so kind as to keep your questions short, and I think I'll bundle them so that we can proceed expeditiously. Go ahead, please.
Great. Thank you. Bernard Ensing, representing the World Cycling Alliance and the European Cyclist Federation. First, my compliments to this conference that we have much more cycling and quotes about cycling than we had 2 years ago when I attended this conference. We are very impressed, for example, by the stories from Mexico. And my question very shortly is, what happened to the Netherlands, what happened to Rotterdam, that it takes so much time for Mr. Langenberg that he is mentioning cycling just now a minute ago. So the Netherlands were always, you can say, a good example for cycling policy. But what I miss is the enthusiastic story from the Netherlands to help the world with the excellent infrastructure and policies we have in the Netherlands. So come on, what is happening in the Netherlands with cycling?
All right, Vice Mayor, one sentence, please. And
No, one sentence will not satisfy the... No, I thought it was so obvious. Just to know, of course, you know that we have more bikes than people in the Netherlands. When you look at our public transportation participation, then you see we are very low because people use bikes for, and that's what we say, use a bike when you have to go for a distance of 5 miles or 7 kilometers or less, and use an electric bike. So you can use for a distance till 10 kilometers. So we have dedicated bike lanes. We export it, for example, here to the US to teach, sorry for the word, to the Americans, to tell them how biking is so extremely very much important. Of course, we are easy to talk. Our land is very flat. Our climate is okay for biking. But I understand all that. But there is special here in DC. There are so many options to bike more than they do now. But if you want more, let us connect later on.
thank you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you.
I'm going to say to the gentleman at the front, Mike, I'm afraid we're going to have to cut off with the line we had in the back before, so maybe you can find the speakers in the break if you would like to. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Karel Martens from Radboud University in the Netherlands. And Mr. Viegas said he didn't want to frame sustainable transport as cars versus public transport. And he said he wanted to emphasize that choice is very important. And I would agree that choice is very attractive for people. A choice is also very attractive for politicians because it avoids making tough choices. But I would argue that providing choice in terms of transport options requires both space and budget. And so giving dense cities and limited budgets, we have to make tough choices. And so sustainable transport is about putting sustainable options versus the less sustainable options, and we have to make the choices. We cannot use the framing of choice to avoid that difficult decisions. So I would like to have a response on that. Thank you.
I agree. I did not say that I wanted to have car versus public transport. I think both are necessary. But if you have your strategic objectives clear, you will be in a good condition to make the allocation of priorities. And I did not say it's equal conditions for both modes. But you should not be cutting totally one, because there will be still some people who otherwise will feel that, and there are some trips in which I personally prefer to use the car. I don't have a car now, I live in Paris. But in some trips, I think it's normal that people want to have the car. I mean, having the goal that the percentage of cars in the market for trips will be 0 is, I think, totally wrong. You don't need that, and it will make people unhappy. So it's really having the priorities right. And there I agree with you. So it's really a question of semantics.
Thank you very much.
This question is for Dr. Mancera, and if you don't mind, I want to make the question in Spanish. Doctor Mancera, ¿qué posibilidades hay de hacer algún tipo y qué beneficios y qué resultados habría si se hiciera un programa a gran escala en donde se eduque y se estimule a la gente que actúe en favor del medio ambiente, atacando primero como objetivo a la nueva generación en muchos temas concretos que si funcionan, por ejemplo, eliminando la huella de carbono, motivándolos a salir a pie, manejándose varios en un carro, etcétera, cosas que desde chicos empiecen a hacerlo. Muchas veces ya los hijos regañan a los padres, entonces se va formando una nueva generación que está muy consciente.
Sí, muchas gracias por su pregunta. La verdad es que es un cambio de visión total. Yo creo que las buenas prácticas y el poner énfasis en las que han funcionado en el mundo ayuda y nos ayuda a todos. ¿Cómo podemos llegar a los resultados? Eso dependerá obviamente tanto del esfuerzo como del interés de la financiación. Cada una de las ciudades destinamos parte de nuestro presupuesto para impulsar estas buenas prácticas. Por ejemplo, la Ciudad de México este año tuvo la decisión o de crecer con las bicicletas o de invertir en buses. Y optamos por las bicicletas porque en la Ciudad de México la bicicleta se ha vuelto una forma de movilidad al trabajo, no solamente una parte recreativa, sino una forma de movilidad efectiva. Entonces, yo creo que estas buenas prácticas, este impulso que se está dando al combate a la contaminación, estas estrategias compartidas son benéficas para las ciudades, pero sí habría que tomar un liderazgo y un proyecto y habría que tomar dónde se tienen ya esos programas para compartir con todas las ciudades y poder estar midiendo cuánto estamos haciendo cada uno de nosotros, cuánto estamos participando. Y ahí debía plantearse incluso bonos, porque se habla mucho de los bonos verdes, pero hasta hoy yo no he visto todavía ningún bono verde. No sé si sea culpa de mi secretario de Finanzas o de mi secretario de Medio Ambiente, que por aquí están, pero la realidad es que sí debe haber, yo creo que un estímulo a quienes estén participando en esto y tomar esas prácticas. Ya me extendí otra vez, perdón. Bien.
No, not at all. Thank you. So we have one final question.
Thank you very much. I'm Henrik Guddensen from the Technical University of Denmark. Now this session is dealing with the Sustainable Development Goals as one of the topics. If and when these goals are adopted, there will be a need for monitoring the progress towards the goal worldwide. There will be need for indicators and other measures to follow up. And my question is to cities primarily, whether cities are ready to monitor these goals. Are these goals operational? Can cities contribute with information on the fulfillment on these goals? And maybe also to the Minister from India, whether countries are ready to provide the statistical backup, the general statistics that will be needed to report precisely on the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal for cities. Thank you very much.
Let's briefly start with the cities, perhaps, and then come to you. And I'll ask everybody to keep their response fairly brief. The fact is, both of your cities are part of the C40 initiative, and it has committed to providing actionable reporting and to more transparency. So how would you answer the question that we just heard there? Are you ready to do that, and do you have the standards you need?
Nos tienen que medir, es un hecho. Tiene que medirse, tiene que haber indicadores. No sé si me pueden poner otra vez en la pantalla la imagen que teníamos de monitoreo. Si la tuvieran por ahí. Bueno, esto es en tiempo real. Esto que se está viendo en la pantalla es hoy, es tiempo real, y la Ciudad de México está haciendo este monitoreo de manera permanente. Yo creo que todos deberíamos demostrar qué es lo que decía yo hace rato, qué es lo que estamos haciendo y qué tan efectivo es lo que estamos haciendo. Y si no, bueno, pues reorientar. Pero sí debemos de tener indicadores, porque si no, los compromisos pueden ser muchos y nos podríamos fijar ahorita 10 o 20 mil millones de toneladas de reducción, pero ¿cómo es que vamos a estar demostrando la calidad del aire en cada una de nuestras ciudades? Creo que esto habría que tenerlo muy claro. Sí, me parece que es fundamental que lo midamos y me parece que es fundamental con ese mismo concepto de red de ciudades que se planteó hace rato, que se pudiera trabajar de manera efectiva con los financiamientos de BID, de Banco Mundial y de otras organizaciones a objetivos específicos.
Yes, I can be very brief. Of course, we need statistics. We need we need numbers to base our policy making. That's of course what we do in the Netherlands too, also in the city of Rotterdam. And if I look again at the goals of the SDG and the targets, it's not very difficult to have those statistics and even to elaborate on this more, because they are so abstract. And they are just mentioning it's important to do road safety, to do public transportation. Of course, we have numbers about our ridership of public transportations. We know how casualties we have in road safety, so that will not be the biggest problem. We are also a member of C40. Recently, we, by the Rockefeller Foundation, we connected now to the 100 resiliency cities. They also ask for a lot of data. And so together with all these C40 resilient cities programs, we work together. And in this sense, we can also enjoy a lot of statistics and experiences from other cities. So I would really underline the importance of this. In the end, of course, I hope that all the people who work for the city of Rotterdam, of course, work foremost for the real concrete policies of the city of Rotterdam, and that asking for statistics, I agree, but let us please be not too bureaucratic. Thank you.
Secretary.
You said whether the cities are ready to take care of the sustainable development goals or not. The answer is clearly no in case of India. However, when we talk about development of 100 smart cities, when we talk about urban renewal of 500 cities, each having a population of more than 100,000, we are putting it as a condition precedent. And we say that we will be able to support you in the development of your town. We means the government of India, the central government, only if you demonstrate your willingness and your commitment to undertake all that has to be done to take care of sustainable development goal. And we are very sure that we'll be able to convince them, to motivate them, and to ask them to undertake all these sustainable development goals. And we are working with Bloomberg Philanthropy to create some kind of a matrix which will ultimately give rise to a city challenge, some kind of a competition, and on the basis of that competition, we'll be selecting these 100 and 500 cities.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all of you for being part of this very thought-provoking, very far-ranging discussion. We've set a lot of themes that we will be picking up on throughout the rest of the forum. So many, many thanks to you for getting us off to such a very good start. And thanks to all of you out there in the audience for your participation and your attention. Before you all leap up, I'm going to save the applause till the very end so that I can give you a few very key facts before you go out to get coffee. We will take a break. It was supposed to be 30 minutes. It'd be great if we can try to make it a little bit shorter because we are running just a little bit late. So please return to this room, let's say 10 before the hour, if possible. Please be sure to pass by the publications tables outside. They have a lot of informative publications from Transforming Transportation's organizers, partners, and sponsors. Please remember to follow the event on social media at #DC15. And also you can, of course, get live streaming at our website, www.transformingtransportation.org. And those translation headsets, they go in the bins outside the door. And I'll see you back here after the break. Enjoy it. Bye-bye. Thanks. And applause.